Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second session for our thesis seminar for the topic Quantitative Research Design. So, I will be introducing our speaker for tonight. Our speaker for tonight received his Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree from Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Pasay in 2010. In 2015, he earned his Master of Health Professions Education from the University of Philippines, Manila, under a UP Presidential Scholarship grant. His master's thesis was partly funded by the University of the Philippines National Institutes of Health and the National Teachers Training Center for the Health Professions. He completed his PhD in Health Sciences with the supervision of Dr. Tetsuya Tanioka at Tokushima University in Japan. He received funding from the Fuji Otsuka International Exchange Fund for his PhD studies and was awarded the Outstanding Student Research Award. Last July 2024, he completed his second doctorate, a PhD in nursing at Silliman University under the supervision of Dr. Evelyn Abalos. He is the managing editor of the Journal of Health and Caring Sciences, the official health and caring research publication of San Beda University, as well as a member of San Beda University Research Ethics Board. He is a full professor and the chair of the Ethics Committee at the National University in Manila, Philippines. He has presented research in various national and international research fora and has published a number of research articles in reputable index journals. His research interest focuses on public health, caring science, palliative and end-of-life care, and nursing pedagogy. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, our speaker for tonight, Dr. Gil Soriano.
Thank you so much, Dr. Valaria, for the introduction. I would like to greet everyone a pleasant evening, and also to Ma'am Carmela Del Rosario for being present tonight. I was given the task to discuss the quantitative research designs. And let me share my screen. Okay, so here we have the quantitative research designs. So in doing a quantitative research design, or quantitative research, it's very important that we first define the variable that we are going to study. So also it's very important that we identify what is the independent variable, the dependent variable, and also confounding on intervening variables. These will help us as to what type of research design is appropriate for our current study. Also, by formulating specific research questions, these will carefully help us devise what are the appropriate data analysis technique to use in analyzing the collected data. Now, we can actually categorize the research designs into two. We have the social science research designs and the health research designs. Okay, so if we're going to look at the social science research designs, we have three broad categories. We have the quantitative research designs, and we have two under this. We have the experimental and the non-experimental. And then we have the qualitative research design, and then the mixed method research designs. And then for the health research designs, we have two types. We have your descriptive and your analytic. Now, if you will notice, there are no qualitative research designs under health research designs because these health research designs are primarily used by epidemiologists and public health researchers. So Primarily, these are used in doing randomized clinical trials, longitudinal studies, cross-sectional studies, etc. Mainly, this is focused on the public health, medicine, medical technology, among others. But for the social science research designs, this is primarily used in the field of education, humanities, and also other allied health professions like nursing. So it's very important, as I mentioned earlier, to carefully devise the objectives of the study, because we will be encountering a number of questions, okay, when we select the appropriate research design to use in our study. First, is your study trying to determine a cause and effect relationship? Now, if the answer is yes, the next question will be, is the independent variable manipulated? If the answer is yes, then you're going to select experimental research. If the answer is no, then you're going to use causal comparative research. Now, going to the next one, if the answer is no for the cause and effect relationship, the next question will be, are you going to determine relationship or prediction? If the answer is yes, then you're going to do correlational research. And if the answer is no, you're going to do or select a survey research. So next, let us discuss first the experimental research. Now, in order for the study to be considered experimental research, there are certain criteria to be met, okay? And there are three categories of experimental research. First, we have the pre-experimental. Next, we have the true experimental. And then we have the quasi-experimental. Now, they are primarily called or fall under the experimental research design because they met the first criteria of being an experimental research, and that is manipulation of variables. While the other category is not met. That's why they are categorized as pre, true, and quasi-experimental. Now let us first discuss the pre-experimental research designs. Now there are three categories under this. We have the static group comparison design. We have the one group pre-test, post-test design. And we have the one-shot case study design. Now first, we have the one-shot case study design. So there will be treatment. Okay, but if you will notice, the one group is not randomized. Okay, there is no randomization of the participants, which does not meet the other criteria for an experimental research. And then when you do the or give the treatment, you're going to perform a post-test, and that will be the outcome of the research. Okay, that's the one-shot case study design. There's no pre-test. You mainly just give the treatment, and then you will measure the performance. Maybe the study is all about the effectiveness of a training program in improving the competencies of nurses. For example, in performing hand washing, for example lang. Okay? So, in doing so, you for example, second, oh, I want to select all nurses here in Ward 4A. So all of the nurses assigned in Ward 4A will undergo a training program about hand washing. Then after the training program, I will be administering an exam, a post-test, to check if they were able to understand, okay, the training program or the concepts discussed in the training program. Either it can be a knowledge test to test the cognitive competencies, or return demonstration to check the skill competencies. It really depends on what are the competencies that are being measured when you perform an experimental research design. So next, we have the one group pre-test, post-test design. So again, in this type of your pre-experimental, there is no randomization. So going back to our example, I will now select the nurses working in Ward 4A, and then I will be giving a pre-test. So I will first, for example, my goal is to increase their knowledge and their competencies in performing hand washing. So my pre-test will be, I will be giving a 20-item quiz about hand washing. And then I will check how do they perform hand washing. Then that will be my pre-test. After that, the post-test, the intervention or the treatment will be, I will be, they will undergo a training program about hand washing. Then after the training program, I will now be administering a post-test to check if there are changes in the competencies of the participants based on the cognitive and the performance of the hand washing. So once you get the data from the before and after of your intervention, you're now going to compare their performance. Is there an improvement before and after the training program? So you're going to use a specific data analysis technique to know these changes. Next, we have the static group comparison design. So mainly, you're trying to compare, two groups and check if there are significant differences, in their performance. That's why it's called static group comparison design. So there is no actual treatment to be given to the participants, but you're mainly measuring. So for example, I will select nurses working in Ward 4A and nurses working in Ward 4B. And then they will both perform hand washing. Then I will compare the performance between group 1 and group 2. So again, there is no randomization. Okay? So already the participants are already pre-selected. So that is for your pre-experimental research design. Now, for the true experimental, we have also 3 types. We have the randomized post-test only control group design. We have the randomized pre- and post-test control group design. And we have the randomized Solomon 4 group design. Now, true experimental research is called true experimental because these studies were able to meet the criteria to be called a true experimental. The first one is there is randomization of participants. When I talk about randomization, meaning all of the population in the data set have an equal chance of being selected. And you randomly select who will be the participants, who will fall under the treatment group, and who will fall under the control group if you are using 2 groups. But if not, maybe who will be grouped into your control group. So it depends on the specific true experimental research design that you have selected. Another thing is the manipulation of the variables. There will be a group that will not receive the intervention, and there's a group that will receive the intervention. So experimental research design, again, is very useful when you are trying to implement a training program. If this will be your thesis, or if this will be your part of your research endeavor, then you might want to consider doing experimental research. So first, randomized post-test only control group design. So again, subjects are randomly assigned, so as denoted by the R sign. And then post-test only, no pre-test. So if you will notice, there are 2 groups that are randomly selected. We have the treatment group and we have the control group. The treatment group will undergo for example, let's go back to our example. Okay, competencies in hand washing. So this group will undergo this training program, while this other group, the control group, will not undergo any training program. Then afterwards, both of this group will be tested for their competencies. So by doing this, we will be able to determine if there are any effect with regards to the training program that has been implemented. So do you think the conduct of the training program is relevant? Okay, we will be able to know that if there will be significant difference between the two groups. But if you found out that there's no significant difference, then we can conclude that the conduct of the training program is not relevant in the competencies of the participants, since there are no significant difference. So next, we have two groups. Okay, the randomized pre and post-test control group design. So both of these have pre-test and post-test. For the first type, there is no pre-test. But for this one, we have the pre-test and the post-test. So the two groups will be randomly selected, and then they will be tested, okay, before the implementation of the training program. When we talk about the control group, they will be receiving the standard intervention that is usually received. For example, determining the effectiveness of high-flex learning among health science students or among nursing students. So the standard teaching methodology that we do in the school is face-to-face. Since that is the standard, that is the program or the intervention that will be received by the control group. Then, since we are trying to determine the effectiveness of high-flex, and this is a new approach, this will be assigned to your treatment group. So then after the implementation of these two different programs, we're now going to check, okay, the performance. So meaning we're going to compare the performance before and after of these two different approach. So will there be no significant difference, or will there be a significant difference? So if there will be no significant difference, then we can say that high-flex learning is comparable to traditional learning, because the performance of the students who are receiving face-to-face instruction is the same with the performance of the students who are receiving the high-flex learning. So that is a conclusion that you might derive from that specific example. So next, the randomized Solomon for group design. So this is actually the most ideal approach that we do in the conduct of experimental research design, because you will be employing two treatment group and two control group. Of course, all of these four groups will be randomly assigned. So the first treatment group will receive a pre-test, and the second treatment group will not receive any pre-test, but they will receive the same intervention, and then they will be tested after the intervention. Next, for the control group, the first control group will be tested before the implementation of the intervention. And the second control group, they will not receive any pre-test. But again, they will receive the same treatment. And then they will be tested after the implementation of the training program. So if we're going to go back to our example earlier, so determining the effectiveness of high-flex learning among nursing students. So if this will be the treatment group, so you will check the performance before, and then you give the high flex learning, and then you check the performance afterwards. The second treatment group, there will be no pretest. They will undergo high flex learning, and then you will check the performance. For the control group number 1, you will check the performance before, and then you are going to have them undergo the traditional approach, the face-to-face. And then you're going to check the performance afterwards. For the second control group, they will not undergo any pretest. They will undergo the same intervention, which is the face-to-face, and then you will check the performance afterwards. Now, why is it very ideal? Because by doing this, we will be able to determine if the changes in the performance of the students can be accounted to the intervention or treatment that was given to the participants. So this is the most ideal one, but very difficult to perform. That's the application in your social science approach. But in randomized clinical trial, this is also done, especially if they're trying to discover new drugs, okay, for certain diseases. Next, we have the quasi-experimental design. Now, there are 3 types also. We have the factorial design, the counterbalance design, which has your 3 treatment counterbalance design, and your time series counterbalance design. We also have your matching only design. Now, the quasi-experimental met the criteria of manipulation of the variables. But the one that is not met by the quasi-experimental is the randomization. So meaning there is no manipulation, or there is no randomization of the participants, meaning they are pre-selected already. First, we have the matching only design. So you have matching of subjects in the experimental and control groups based on similar traits. So mainly, for example, all of them are level 1 or all of them are level 2. So similar traits. And then maybe a post-test or pre-test post-test can be done, okay, among the control group and treatment group. Next, we have the counterbalance design. Now, for this counterbalance design, the design exposes the subjects to all treatments in different orders. So there are 2 distinct types of this. First, we have the 3 treatment counterbalance design. So 3 groups is given 1 treatment and post-tested after treatment. So if you will notice, there are 3 groups. And then they will be exposed to 3 types of treatment. For example, the objective is to determine the most effective teaching methodology to improve the performance of the students. For example, the first treatment will be face-to-face. The second treatment will be virtual approach, virtual learning only. And then third treatment will be combination of both face-to-face and virtual learning. So for example only. Now for the group 1, okay, they will be exposed first in the first treatment. Para siyang cycle. Okay? And then after that, the group 3 will first be exposed in the second treatment, and the group 2 will be first exposed to the third treatment. Same with the and then it will be rotated to different groups. So group 1, first treatment, second treatment, third treatment, and then group 2, same, magro-rotate lang sila. All of them will be receiving different treatment at different time interval. So iba-iba ng iba-iba ng time interval when they will receive the specific treatment. So that is your counterbalance design, or the treatment counterbalance design. Now, this is actually my favorite, the time series counterbalance design. So, in this specific approach, okay, you are going to observe the performance of a specific participant not once but multiple times at different time intervals. So if you're going to go back to our first example, so for example, I would like to determine the effectiveness of hand washing practices before and after, okay, the training program. So what you're going to do, you're going to observe, okay, the performance of the hand washing 5 times at different time intervals. Okay, of course, the challenge here is that the participants should not be able to know that they are being observed, so as to prevent the Hawthorne effect. Because if that will happen, okay, they might change their behavior during the time of the observation. That's your Hawthorne effect. Okay, the change in the behavior when the participants know that they're being observed. So then after you've observed the participants for 5 times, you're now going to administer the treatment. So for example, your training program. And then after that, you're now going to observe them again 5 times. Kung ilang beses mo siya in-observe for the pre-treatment, that's also the same number of times that you will observe them post-treatment. So as to have a balance, kaya nga counterbalance design. So there should be equal observations before and after, so that we will be able to properly compute the differences between the two. Next, factorial design. So for this factorial design, so one variable is tested at 2 levels and another variable is likewise studied. So if you will notice, there are 2 levels, level 1 and level 2. So first year and second year. And then, okay, and then they will be exposed, okay, to 2 instructional methods, didactics and computer-aided instruction. So just like your 3 treatment counterbalance design, but for this one, both of them will be exposed at the same treatment. Kung yung ating 3 treatment counterbalance design, the groups will be exposed at to different treatments at different time interval. For this factorial design, they will be exposed at the same treatment at the same time. So kaya siya factorial design. So next, we have your causal comparative design. Now for this specific approach, we can actually assume causality. Meaning, for example, the objective of the study is to determine if there is a significant effect of spirituality on death anxiety among older adults. So for example, you want to know kung ito bang spirituality is may effect sa death anxiety, or kung takot bang mamatay yung older adults. Okay? Pero mataas naman ang kanilang spirituality, sa spirituality level nila. So, in this type of research, you can do that, the causality or the causal comparative research. As compared to correlational study. Kasi sometimes, researchers tends to assume causality in correlational research, where in fact you should not. Because you mainly tested for relationship, not the causality. So you need to use different statistical measure in order to assume causality. So the causal comparative research is also known as your ex post facto research. So it determines the causes or consequences of differences that have already occurred among subjects. So it involves the use of categorical variables and compare averages or use cross tables. So another thing that we can use here is your regression analysis if we're trying to determine the predictors, okay, predictors or specific cause and effect relationship between and among the variables. Okay, you can assume causality on this for your causal comparative research. So you can either use logistic regression or linear regression to determine which of these variables are most likely to have an effect in a specific variable. Okay, next. For this one, relationship or prediction. So, first we have your correlational research. As I mentioned earlier, you cannot assume causality when you are trying to conduct a correlational research, as it will depend on the type of statistical analysis that you're going to use. If you're mainly going to use Pearson R or your Spearman-Rank correlation, you cannot assume causality. So, but if you use a different kind of data analysis technique and you phrase your objectives as something that will show, okay, or determine causality, then you can assume causality between and among the variables. So as indicated, correlational research attempts to look relationship among the variables. So only relationship, no causality or no comparison. So those are two different approaches. And they're only limited to quantitative variables. Although it really depends on how you interpret your data. Because, for example, what if you use data that are ordinal in nature? So it depends on how you're going to present your data. Next, the cause and effect relationship. Okay, no cause and effect relationship and no relationship or prediction. So mainly you are doing survey research. So mainly describing the variables, no specific inferential statistics. So you're only using descriptive statistics such as your mean, standard deviation, frequency, percentage. No other inferential statistics. So information is gathered from the respondents to determine the characteristics of the population. So there are two types. We have the cross-sectional study, wherein the data will be collected at one point in time. So for example, you want to know the prevalence of leptospirosis, okay, during the Typhoon Enteng. Okay, so you will only denote a specific number so as to describe how many percentage is the prevalence of leptospirosis. That's the only thing that you need to do if you're going to use survey research. Next, for the longitudinal study, you're going to collect data at different points in time, okay, to determine changes over time. So meaning you can collect data regarding the prevalence of leptospirosis during the time of Ondoy, Karina, Enteng, or different typhoons. That will be your longitudinal study. I think the most famous longitudinal study is the Framingham-Hart study, wherein the researchers tried to determine the factors that can contribute to the increase in the blood pressure of the participant. So chinek nila lahat ng pwedeng factors. So naglagay sila ng age, gender, tapos yung diet. So chinek lang nila, okay, which of these factors, okay, is more likely to lead to hypertension. So kasi longitudinal, 10 years siya in the making. Okay, survey, mainly by doing survey research. They monitor the participants every year or a specific point in time. Next, another emerging quantitative research method is your systematic review. So when you talk about systematic review, you are trying to integrate, okay, results from different studies. And then you appraise the studies if this will be relevant to your formulated research objectives. So for example, you would want to know the care practices of nurses, okay, in emergency room. So you will be selecting studies relevant to examining the caring practices of nurses in the ER. And then you're going to extract the studies and analyze if this will be relevant based on your set criteria. So there will be criteria that you need to select. So for example, I will select studies that were published from 2015 to 2024, and then studies that are only in English, studies that are available full text, so depending on the database that you're going to use, studies that are open access, so you will be able to set criteria. So example of these are mass media or school-based or community-based interventions effective in preventing smoking in young people. So the approach that we use in doing systematic review is not the same as the approach that we do when we're trying to do an empirical research. So the designs that I have discussed earlier are all empirical research. But for this specific approach, the systematic review, we use the PICOT framework or the PICOT chart. So for this, the P stands for population, I for intervention, C for comparison, O for outcome, and T for type of studies. They will be optional, but this will depend on the availability of specific research designs. So when you begin your literature search, it's very important that you set a specific criteria, okay, that you need to that needs to be present in the literature to be included in the review. So if you will notice here the example for the population, all of the studies that involve young people under 25 years of age are qualified. So meaning if the studies involve participants who are more than 26 years old, then they will not be included in the review. Next, if the study involves intervention, which includes television, radio, newspapers, billboards, posters, leaflets, and booklets, then they will also be included in the review. Next, those that include school-based intervention and no intervention at all, they can also be added. While for the outcome, so this might involve measuring the smoking level by checking the saliva levels, the self-reported smoking behavior by giving a questionnaire, or intermediate measures by checking the intention, the attitude, the knowledge and skills among the participants, and also media reach. The type of studies involved can either be RCTs, controlled before and after studies, and time series designs. So, and you can actually select any studies. Pwedeng correlational, pwedeng survey, pwedeng causal comparative. It really depends on what type of study are you targeting in your review. You will decide when you do a systematic review. It's just very important that you set all of these firsthand before you perform the search, because if not, you might be overwhelmed with the volume of the literatures that you will encounter when you do the actual search. Now, one of the most effective database or common database that we use when we perform systematic review is the Cochrane Library. So this contains records of systematic review that has been done or has been implemented already. Now, I think currently, before you're able to perform a systematic review that is clinical in nature, you need to register your study in Prospero. And you need to have the Prospero access number or control number so that the journal will accept your study if you want to publish the paper. Otherwise, if the study is not clinical in nature, you don't need to secure the Prospero number. You just have to screen literatures based on your objectives. Another one is Campbell collaboration. The difference between the two, the Cochrane collaboration contains studies about randomized clinical trial or clinical researches. But for the Campbell collaboration, these contain studies about social sciences and humanities. So two types of organization. Because systematic reviews actually emanated from clinical research. And then because researchers were able to prove that systematic reviews can be applied to social sciences, so they started adopting this approach to social sciences. Now, how do we do systematic review? The first thing is that we need to first find mesh and text words to describe young people. When you talk about your mesh, these are medical subject headings or known as your controlled vocabularies. These can be found in the US National Library of Medicine database. So meaning, you cannot, there's a specific term to use if you want to refer to something. And this can be found in the US NLM. If the journal that you're trying to publish your work on specifically use mesh keywords, then you are not to use just any type of keywords in your study. You really need to search the mesh counterpart in order to define the specific term that you want to use in the study. So, what are the important keywords here? Mass media, prevent smoking, and young people. So for the P, the population will be young people. Okay, so the mesh keywords here is the adolescent, child, and minors. If we're going to look at the mesh, okay, the National Library of Medicine. So that's a specific database in the United, organized by United States or developed by the US in order to have a systematic or uniform definition of a specific term. So when we talk about text words, these are slang or uncontrolled keywords. So meaning these are not acceptable words if we're going to use the standards of mesh. But still, these are very relevant when you're trying to capture a specific term. So example, adolescent, child, juvenile, young people, student, girl, boy, teenager, young adult, youth. So these are slang because all of these refer to young people. So kung ano man ang gamitin mo sa lahat ng to, each of these can refer to young people. So that's a slang word. Okay, all of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 words are slang words to refer to young people. While these 3 words, these are controlled vocabularies to refer to young people. So next, we can use also specific methodology in order to help us in doing our literature search. So for example, we can use truncation. Okay, when we use truncation, we actually use a specific root word, and then the last one will be used by a dollar sign or a sharp, a star key. And then automatically, when you type the word, all of the words that contains the first 4 letters of the root word will appear in the search. For example, teenage, teenager, teenagers, teens, and teen. While for this, the smoke, smoking, smokes, smoker, and smokers, they will appear if you use truncation. That's a specific method when you do literature search. There are different approaches in doing literature search, but I will not cover it here since we are only discussing systematic review. Next, wildcards. So wildcards are very important when you are trying to capture not only English literature, but also British literature. Because some journals uses British English and some journals uses American English. So if you put COLO?R, you can capture the British form of color and the American English form of color. So you can capture the literatures containing these 2 words. Next, the step 2. Okay, you find the mesh, just like the first step, kasi your goal is to find the mesh and the text words for all of these 3 important terms: mass media, prevent smoking, and young people. So your next will be mass media intervention. So based on your search, the mesh keywords will be all of these. Okay, if you want to refer to your mass media, you can use all of this term based on mesh. Advertising, videotape recording, newspaper, telecommunication, etc. Of course, you also need to find the text words. Okay? So the text words can either be, now we can use the vlog. Okay? What else? Reels. So those are slang. Okay? That have not yet been accepted in the standards of mesh, but can be used as a term to capture mass media. So reels, vlog, etc. Among and other types of media. Next is prevention of smoking. Okay, of course, you need to again find the mesh keywords and the text words. Okay, so next, you need to combine, okay, both the mesh words and the text words. How do you do that? By using the Boolean operator. Okay, we have 3 of Boolean operator. We have your and, or, and not. Okay, so to capture this, an example will be, for the mesh, we can use minor or girl for the text words. Example lang. So to combine both the mesh and the text words. The same with the mass media and the prevention of smoking. Okay, that is how you do your systematic review. If I may share also, there are different softwares that we can use in order to properly do a systematic review. And that is your Covidence. I don't know if you have heard of Covidence. So if I may share my other, I'm actually conducting a study on Gen AI, help information seeking by consumers. This is actually a systematic review I am doing with one of my co-author in the United States. So we are using Covidence. So we are extracting literatures in a specific format. I think that's RIS format. You can Covidence that does not accept any other format, not PDF, not Word. It only accepts RIS format. And then you're going to upload the literatures here in the software. Then automatically, the software will remove any duplicates. And then once you're able to screen the studies by removing the duplicates, automatically, the next step will be title and abstract screening. So you need to, for example, these are the studies that I have selected. I will read the title and the abstract, and if I find the study as irrelevant, I will mark it as no. Okay, when I make my decision, then automatically it will be marked as irrelevant reference. Then once I'm able to determine my or select the irrelevant and relevant literatures, the next step will be the full text review. So I will be reading the entire literatures, the full text. Okay, I'm going to check the full text, and then I will now determine if this will be relevant. Okay, so this is the full text. So I'm now going to read the entire study. If this will meet my set criteria, inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then from there, I'll be able to finalize my study. So based on 3,022 literatures, we were able to extract 14 relevant studies to be included in the review. So an important tool in doing systematic review is the Prisma diagram. So for this specific software, you don't need to worry about that because it will automatically perform your Prisma diagram to show how you were able to screen the study. So that will be for your Covidence. I think there's another software in doing systematic review. I think that is known as your nested knowledge. This is also another tool in doing systematic review, nested knowledge. Okay, although I think this is more of a paid software. So the most important, the most user-friendly software is Covidence. So this is also a paid version. Although if you're living in the Philippines, you can request for one access if you're doing systematic review. And then once they found that you are really from the Philippines, they will grant you one access. You'll be able to create one. So here, yan. So we were able to do 3 systematic review. So we'll be given a tab to start a new review. So that's it for the Covidence. So I think I was able to cover the quantitative research designs. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey, ngayon ko lang na-discover yung Covidence. Okay, so if yesterday we learned about how to do the literate automatic citations and RRL, now I think we were able to see the yung sa one of the methods which is um ayun, Zotero yung kahapon. Then now yung Covidence ni Doc Soriano. Okay, let's give him a round of applause first before we entertain questions. Okay. Thank you very much to our speaker. Okay. Thank you, Sir Gil. Okay. So, do you have any questions for our speaker? You may type them in the chat box, or if you prefer, please raise your hand. I will call on you. Si Professor Soriano and I go way back. Anong taon ba yun?
2007,
12? 7 ba? 7.
2000,
Yeah, yung sa
2000, yeah,
maternal. Yung sa maternal na sa ICMC.
sa NTTC.
Oo. Oh, batang-bata pa siya. Walang tanong. Anyone doing who's going to conduct a quantitative paper? Now's the perfect time to ask.
Another emerging quantitative method is actually doing a covariance-based structural equation modeling and your partially square structural equation modeling, and also your moderation and your mediation analysis. So if you are keen on doing your own instrument when you do your dissertation, not ngayon kasi this is only masters. So if you would want to do this pursue this in your PhD, so you can actually look deeper into those concepts.
Quanti is not something I do. That's why I always ask Dr. Soriano for his assistance regarding this. In short, he's the expert, especially in statistics. Okay. Any questions? Wala? Nothing at all? Walang ano. No, puro thank you lang. Okay. Okay, if you don't have questions, I'll be asking you to turn on your cameras so that we can have a group photo. Ang tanong ha? Sige. Okay. Okay, so we have, ay, Doc, still under proposal pa kami. Kaya if ever mag-change to quanti, paano daw pwede ma-reach si Doc? He's our professor currently. So, I think he can type in the chat box his email. Ayan, personal email address pa. Okay. Okay, I'll take a quick photo first. There are 4 panels on the screen. And then if you have questions, I'll read them again. Okay. Okay, at the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, smile. Next panel. Count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Just keep smiling. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And last, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Any questions at all? Sige, I will allow people to unmute themselves. Okay, you may unmute yourselves if you have questions. Nosebleed siguro sila. Hmm. Okay, wala. Okay. Doc Hill, again, thank you very much. As expected, ikaw talaga ang king of quanti. Thank you very much, Dr. Soriano, and to everyone else. I'm sure you learned a lot. Ay, ano ba yan? Ayan. Please look at the chat box. He already left his personal email address. So for everyone, his email address is hil.p.soriano@gmail.com. Ako ba? Okay, so again, His email is Gil, that's Gil dot P dot Soriano at gmail.com. Okay. Okay, so
Yeah, I can't cope with this weather.
I didn't quite get that. Who was that?
Oh, sorry, ma'am. Hindi pa nakamute.
Okay, okay.
I'm leaving the session soon. Thank
Okay,
you.
no
Good,
problem.
good, good night
O-
po sa inyo dyan.
Okay, yes. Okay. So good night, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Doc Hill. Good night, everyone. Okay.